Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. Today I was going to discuss the planetary transits, or Gochara, that are happening in February 2025. This talk is from Vedic Astrology perspective, or Jyotish, as it's known as in Sanskrit, which is ancient Indian astrology, more than 5,000 years old. So it seemed like the kind of theme for this month is a journey of seasons. So let's take a look. Note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support, and you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. If you're new to Vedic Astrology, Jyotish are my videos. All my teaching videos on the subject are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. And wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. My channel is all about playlists, so the different topic areas, different categories of videos are easy to find. So like I have a grahas, planets playlist, bhavas, houses playlist, a yogas, planetary combinations playlist, and there are others. Also, if you like to learn astrology by looking at the birth charts of famous people, places, moments, and time, I would check out my birth chart archive list 2024 video. Although I'll be updating that soon, but I have that video has a list of many of the charts that I've analyzed and the video that you can find them in, because you can't always tell by the title that there are famous charts in the video. So other videos to watch with this one to get more out of this talk, especially if you're new. North, South, and East Indian style charts. I cover Western style charts in that video as well. Introduction to navigating birth chart, the lugna, also known as the ascendant, rising sign, or first house. Introduction to the constellations or Rashis. Constellation or Rashi categories. Planetary aspects. Swagrahas, or planets in their own sign or star. Karako Bhavanasha, or planet breaking house. Natural benefic and malefic planets or grahas. Nakshatras, or lunar mansions. Planets, friends and enemies, graha, mitra, shatru, bhavat, bhavam, house concept. Planetary combustion, asta, sandhi, gandanta, planets in the edge. Planetary exaltation, debilitation, uccha, nicha. Planet retrogression or vakri. And then there are a bunch of different yogas. So parivartana, budhaditya, sarpa, gajakesari, pancha, mahapurusha yogas. So there's a lot that we'll be looking at. So let's see. Okay, so here's a list of all the dates when things are changing in the sky over the course of February. So February 3rd, Jupiter has an exact aspect on Mercury. Also, Venus crosses Rahu. February 4th, Jupiter ends its retrogression, or vakri. February 5th, Sun enters Dhanishta nakshatra. February 6th, Mars has a direct aspect on Sun. February 7th, Mercury enters Dhanishta nakshatra. There's also an exact aspect on it by Mars. February 11th, Mercury enters Aquarius or Kumbha. February 12th, Sun enters Aquarius or Kumbha. This is a samkranti, so sun crossing signs. I have a video on how to deal with that energy. There's also a full moon in Cancer in Ashlesha nakshatra that day. February 14th, Mercury enters Shatabhisha nakshatra. February 19th, Sun enters Shatabhisha. February 22nd, Mercury enters Purva Bhadrapada nakshatra. February 23rd, Mars ends its retrogression, or vakri, and Saturn goes combust, or asta. Then 24th through 25th of February, Mercury and Saturn are in planetary war, or graha yuddha. February 26th, Mercury leaves combustion, or asta. February 27th, there's going to be a new moon in Aquarius or Kumbha, and that's going to be in Shatabhisha as well. And Mercury enters Pisces or Meena that same day. And then on March 1st, just because it's the first of the month, I thought I'd also mention Venus will go into retrogression, or vakri. So not a lot of transits, but I would say very potent. So let's take a look. So what we have here on this slide are two different charts for February 1st and then February 28th, so the first and last day of the month, just so we can see how the sky pattern's shifting. Now, I've set both of these charts to an Aries or Mesha rising Aries rising or Mesha Lugna. The rising sign, ascendant, first house Lugna, those are all different names for the same thing. I use North Indian style charts in my work. So to find the first house, you go to the top diamond in the middle where it says AS, that's ascendant. That's a software script there. So in the bottom corner, you'll see a little 1. The 1 is there not because it's the first house, even though it is. It's there because the 1 represents the first constellation of the zodiac, which is Aries. So this means it's an Aries rising chart, or Mesha in Sanskrit is Aries, and then ascendant is Lagna. Okay. So I've set both of these to Aries or Mesha because when you put the first constellation of Aries in the first house, that creates a natural zodiac, which is sort of like a birth chart for the whole world. So it's where you can kind of look at collective energy. Yeah. Okay, so let's look at the February 1st chart on the left first. It's set for 10:02 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's the time zone I live in. But let's see, the moon nakshatra. A nakshatra is a lunar mansion. There are about 27 nakshatras, and so every night the moon passes through a different one. And by the end of 27 passes, you'll get a lunar month. So 27, 28 days. And each one has a different energy. So the moon nakshatra at the beginning of the month is in Purva. So this is going to be pretty intense starting off the month. Purva is symbolized by the front legs of a funeral pyre. So it's a very destructive, transformative type of energy. Like think of smoke and flames and cremation and that sort of thing. The other thing is that moon is sandhi here. It's in the last degree of the sign of Aquarius. This is happening in the 11th house here. And the moon represents the public, and the 11th house represents clubs, groups, societies. Okay. So it looks like there's some public trouble going on here. Because being sandhi in the last degree or first degree of any sign will make a planet unstable. So moon is unstable. It's in a very intense, transformative nakshatra, and the thing is, it's with Saturn. Saturn is a planet that represents delays, obstacles, long-term troubles, chronic medical complaints, skepticism, doubt, anxiety, depression. I mean, most things that a lot of things that a lot of people aren't interested in, frankly. And when we have Saturn and Moon together in the same sign, that creates sadhisati. So sadhisati is a 7.5-year period where Saturn travels through the sign before, of, or after the natal moon. And Saturn being the slowest moving planet in classical Jyotish, it takes 2.5 years to travel through each sign. So if you go through 3 different signs, 2.5 years, that's 7.5 years. And the commonality of going through sadhisati is that there's a significant loss of a support system. Okay, so already you can see this is quite a challenge here. Yeah. So I would say with the moon, Saturn together in the 11th house is public trouble, especially regarding ideology, because the sign it's in is Aquarius or Kumbha. It's a fixed air sign. So ideas that are fixed. So, people fighting or losing over such things. Yeah. Then the Dasha period or planetary period is Jupiter, Moon, Rahu, Sun. So we're picking up more moon energy. We're going back there. Jupiter is here. What's interesting about Jupiter is that Jupiter, it's retrograde. That line under Jupiter means it's retrograde. That'll bring strength to Jupiter. Jupiter represents things like finance, compassion, balance, law, justice. And Jupiter also represents publishing and oral communication, speech. And it's in the second house, representing speech, finance, especially assets, family, or circle. And Jupiter happens to be in a really nice nakshatra called Rohini at the moment. Rohini is considered to be the most attractive, seductive, fertile, luscious, type of energy. So it's almost the opposite of where the moon is at. So Jupiter being in the second house, you might think that there's going to be a lot of nice, sweet speech, and there might be. The thing is, Jupiter's in parivartana exchange of houses with Venus, which is in the 12th house. So you can swap Jupiter and Venus in your mind, and it brings Venus to the second house as well, which sounds pretty good because Jupiter and Venus are the two great benefics. However, Venus is in nakshatra at this time. Is it in Purva? No, it's just in Uttar. So Venus is in the nakshatra symbolized by the back legs of a funeral pyre. So there's still a lot of transformation, but it's like taking a step back, kind of being a little bit objective about it. Surrendering to that moment or chaos potentially. And so you're bringing, and Venus is in the 12th house of losses and expenditures. So there is some loss going on here. And Venus represents things like people, loved ones, finances, the finer things of life, pets, vehicles, so a lot of the extra goodies, people, that make life pleasant, enjoyable, and creative and artistic and compassionate, social grace, all these sorts of things. So unfortunately, there's a drain. And so this Jupiter retrograde in Rohini seems like it's kind of sugarcoating potentially these losses that are happening here. Okay. Now I'm saying that because also Ketu is aspecting from the 6th house of acute troubles. And Ketu is the south node of the moon. Rahu is the north node of the moon. Ketu and Rahu are both planets that represent hidden, unexpected, veiled things. And so when we have Ketu aspecting Jupiter and Venus, and Rahu's with Venus, it seems like there's a lot of hidden expenditures, losses, and kind of sugarcoating, speech about these things. Okay. So, yeah. Let's keep going. So the yogas in this chart, there are quite a few. There's a budhaditya yoga, that's Sun and Mercury together in the same sign, and it's qualified because Sun owns the 5th house. It's an intelligence combination, especially regarding math and science, so more of a calculating type of intelligence. Then we have a Papaveshi yoga, so that's Saturn in the 2nd house from the Sun. That's going to bring down the Sun, and the Sun represents the soul, purpose, career, general health. Then we have a Duradhara lunar yoga. So we have Venus and Mercury on either side of Moon. That's going to be a bit of a boost actually for the Moon because those are two benefics when we talk about yogas. Although again, Venus is in a not so great nakshatra at this time. But at least there's some positive energy around Moon, despite this really strong Saturn that's almost right on top of it. Then we have a Shubha Kartari yoga. So that's just sort of like a saving grace, I would say, in this chart. Because what that Shubha Kartari is when you have two benefics flanking the Lugna, so in the 2nd and 12th house from the Lugna rising sign. So Jupiter and Venus, probably Jupiter more so than Venus, is actually, Kartari means a scissor, so it's sort of cutting through these troubles that are coming up. And there's quite a few. I've already mentioned a few. I haven't mentioned all of them. So that's nice. So that means that, there's still some power, there's still initiative, there's still some grace to all the things that are going down. Okay. Then there's also the parivartana yoga I mentioned, the exchange of houses between Jupiter and Venus. There's also a Kesari yoga. So this is a Jupiter moon position yoga that's related to networking. So that's also going to, again, Jupiter and moon are in the 2nd house of inner circle family, and then moon is in the flip group society. So that's a lot of relationships, networking, you know. Mars here is a bit troublesome because Mars represents siblings, and that's in the 3rd house representing siblings. That creates what we call a karako bhava nashaya, meaning it actually brings troubles to siblings. This could also potentially be enemies and neighbors because those are things that both Mars and the 3rd house represent. Mars is also, let me check, Mars is also bhavam. So Mars is the lord of the 8th house, and the 8th lord has gone 8 houses away, meaning it's going to bring one chronic problem after another to things in the 3rd house. So again, siblings, relationships, uh, friendships, like friends who are like siblings, neighbors, that sort of thing. Um, yeah, and Mars is in nakshatra called Punarvasu. Punarvasu is symbolized by a quiver of arrows. So there's this energy of like cycling or recycling or having a home base and going out and coming back. So this could be like a lot of turnover, a lot of churn going on in the third house. This could also be like the third house represents non-oral communication, like writing. So there could be a lot of new, writing initiatives that are creating some churn here. Okay. And the Sadhisati I already mentioned. So there are definitely losses here. I would say a lot of emotional losses because Moon and Venus, those are compromised and those are two emotional planets. So I would say there's deep long-term issues with community, and stress about leaving home, traveling. But there's also the opportunity and support potentially to rise above this. Okay. But there is some euphemism going on here. So there's some like indirect speech, people sugarcoating what's actually going on. I think it might be for, it might be to help out. Sometimes it's like somebody has to, rather than everybody kind of getting all negative together, somebody has to start, moving the spiral from a downward direction into an upward direction. So there may be, some of that going on here. And that's the beginning of the month. Then the end of the month, February 28th, again, Aries rising. The moon is in Purva Bhadrapada again. So it hasn't it hasn't really switched, so that may make somebody feel like they're stuck and also stressed because it's still there with Saturn. And now we have an additional malefic on it, Sun. So there's some, energy here in the 11th house. But, maybe trying to move what seems like a pretty big boulder. And again, we still have a sati, so loss of major support system. Shot period in the second chart is Jupiter, Saturn, Moon, Ketu. So Saturn and Moon, that's all this like, negativity going on in the 11th house. The 11th house also represents income. So that might also be problematic. But we're getting Jupiter again. And so again, Jupiter still in parivartana with Venus is still being aspected by Ketu. So there's still this kind of, how do I say, like, something's not, the truth is not being told here. Okay, even though Jupiter represents, um, truth and justice, because Ketu is there, because Venus is there. Again, I don't see, it just seems like something's being covered up here. Usually, and when I see somebody's chart, when I see Ketu or Rahu in the second house, I always assume that the way that somebody speaks is not going to really tell me who they really are. And that's not necessarily like a malicious type of withholding or anything like that, or lying, cheating, that sort of thing. But it may be that they speak in a way that they're very casual, but actually like down to earth or something, but actually they might be like super intellectual. Or the other thing is I've seen other people who like kind of blow smoke. Basically, they try to, how do I say, like, they'll drop a lot of technical jargon or something like that into a conversation, and they're kind of trying to create a smoke screen and try to one up themselves in regards to everybody who's around or listening or part of the conversation or whatever. And they're just like shooting off like jargon. They're not actually saying anything that's so innovative or intelligent or whatever. They're just trying to like one up everybody. Okay, but but it doesn't actually. They may seem intelligent. They may seem very like, oh wow, this person knows a lot. But for somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, it may not actually make sense. They're just like you're just like spinning words. Like you're just listing one jargonish word after another. So anyway, there's a lot of yogas in the second chart too. So we have Veshi yoga here. That we have two positive, natural benefics in the second house from the sun. That's going to help the sun and also from the moon. So there's more support, I would say, for both the sun and the moon. That's nice. Parivartana is still going on. Kartari yoga is still going on. That's a big one, actually. Kesari, we still have the Kesari yoga, so there's still some networking going on. So a lot of it's the same. Mars is still karako, bhava, nashaya, bhavam. So Mars is still problematic in the third house. Saturn, okay, well, this is different. This is actually a big deal. Saturn is actually combust by the end of the month. Towards the end of the month, Saturn will combust. Now, what's going to happen, I believe, there is that when any planet goes combust, it means it's so close to the sun eclipses it with its light, so you can't see it in the sky anymore. So when you translate that to real world terms, what does that mean? Well, you can't see the external features of what that planet represents. So Saturn represents things like, delays, obstacles, chronic disease, death potentially, anxiety, fear, doubt, depression, skepticism. So when Saturn goes combust, it's going to be like suddenly these obstacles, because Saturn has been in Aquarius for almost 2.5 years. We've got another couple months and then it's switching into Pisces, okay? But this last month, it may seem like externally the obstacles and delays we've been dealing with, fighting with for the last 2.5 years, almost sort of magically disappear. Okay. At least the external obstacles, okay? The thing that was when you have a combust planet, the internal qualities get stronger. So while it may seem like outward obstacles are suddenly magically disappeared or attenuated, the internal obstacles of Saturn, which are skepticism, doubt, anxiety, depression, might increase. Okay, so internally it might get darker. Well, externally, because it's almost like if whatever you've been up against, and we've all been up against something for the last 2.5 years, suddenly gets better. It's like going from night to day. We may not trust it. We probably don't trust it. Okay. So the thing is, it's almost like we get an extra month free of Saturn, while because Saturn's gonna be, combust for a month, and I'll talk about it more. But literally, Saturn comes back online, gets out of combustion the same day it's moving into Pisces. So it's almost like the external obstacles disappear. We're still worried about it because we don't trust the obstacles have really disappeared. Um, and then Saturn moves into a different sign. So it's almost like when we finally wake up, after about a month of Saturn being combust, it's like we wake up to a whole new world. So whatever we've been, our backs have been up against for the last 2.5 years, that's no longer the issue because Saturn has moved out of that sign. Yeah. So that's going to be interesting. Yeah. So, again, multiple unexpected acute troubles. I would say loss of voice of control here because of Jupiter. Also, what is it? Well, that's the other thing is Saturn. This massive Saturn is aspecting the first house of Aries, where it's debilitated. That's going to bring a lot of obstacles. Except, once Saturn goes combust, it's like, whoa, everything suddenly got better. And then the thing is, Mars is problematic, and that's the ruling planet for the whole chart. But I would say that there is a loss of voice and control because the other thing is that um, Mercury, which is a planet representing communication, is in the 12th house of loss and expenditures, and Jupiter is in the 12th house by way of parivartana, exchange of houses with Venus. So, and that's a lot of loss of voice. And then the thing, like Mars is potentially a controlling planet, but it's problematic. And then K2 is on the second house and also the 10th house there. K2 brings a lot of chaos. Um, so yeah. And with Sun eclipsing Saturn and making it combust, we may see more of like father, authority, government bosses being more prominent, stepping up to the plate here to take control of because there's a lot going on here. And that's the thing too, is that, by the end of March, I mean, we're not talking about March, but by the end of March, Saturn, Moon, and Sun are also going to be in the 12th house. So we're going to have 6 planets in the 12th house of loss and expenditures by the end of March. And we've got eclipses coming up in March. So in the 6th house of acute troubles and the 12th house of losses and expenditures. So we've got, things are getting tense, basically. Okay. So yeah, hopefully some, decent leadership will step up. I think at this point, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 7, 1. I think Sun, though, I am remembering my numbers here, but I think Sun at this point is in Shatabhisha nakshatra. Shatabhisha is a nakshatra indicating like difficulties, problems that are hard to diagnose and treat. And so the Sun here, this might be, even though the government authority, boss or whatever might be more prominent, I don't know that they're capable of ameliorating this because this is a pretty serious, energy building up here. Yeah. So, and again, once Saturn goes combust and it's like, oh wow, what happened? Just know that, it's temporary. In a month or so, Saturn's going to come back online, but in a different area of life. So we're going to be shifting our focus as the game board shifts, And again, Saturn's just the first of the 4 like, long-term slow planets that are shifting. So Saturn's going to shift at the end of March, and then we have Rahu, Ketu, and Jupiter shifting mid-May. So within 6 weeks, the 4 slowest moving planets, which really kind of give a strong, steady vibe, energy to life, they're all shifting. So the game board is shifting. Yeah. And so this is the transitory period. So again, this is part of why I said, a journey of seasons, because again, in this case, the game board's changing, but in a way, but it's like we're just going to be in a different season when the planets shift. So it's like going down the same road, but when you go down that road in spring, it might look different than fall or winter, but it's actually the same road. But sometimes you have to navigate it differently, right? If there's ice and snow on the road, you have to slow down a little bit. If there's leaves blowing or wind blowing, you got to make sure that you can see. Maybe in spring you want to slow down just to enjoy the flowers. So yeah, so that's what's going on in terms of the sky shifting. Let's take a look at planets now. So on this slide we have the 2 fiery planets, Sun, Surya, and Mars, Mangal. February 5th, Sun enters Dhanishta nakshatra. So Dhanishta is symbolized by a drum, and Sun represents father, boss, leader, possibly career as well. So this is creating some new rhythm related to these things. Dhanishta can literally represent, because it's a drum, can literally represent music. It can also represent like the drum, like a military drum, like soldiers walking, in rhythm, that sort of thing. Sun is there, which is a fiery planet. Mars is aspecting, and you can see Mars has a direct aspect on the Sun the next day, February 6th. So that's 2 fiery planets. The other thing is that Ketu is aspecting Sun, as is Mars. So Ketu is also a kind of a fiery planet in a way, but it's also, Mars is erratic. Ketu's more erratic and hidden. This is a huge, like, explosive energy building up here. And potentially it, can be like a military action. If it's music, this is some like wild, explosive, like hard rock type, you know, uh, aggressive movement here. Okay, it could even be potentially dance because Mars represents like movement, muscles and movement and action and stuff like that. Okay. So then February 7th, Mars has a direct aspect on Mercury. Mercury is also in the mix here. So Mercury represents things like speech, talk, writing, decisions. So there's some fiery, aggressive, all this aggressive, fiery energy is affecting Mercury as well. Mercury, let's see. Yeah, I think at that point, Mercury is still in Uttarashada, which is a victorious energy again, but it's sharp and piercing, so more, intense energy. Or it can be in Shravana. Shravana is about listening and speaking. Then the 12th of February, Sun enters Aquarius or Kumbha, so that's going to, cool things down a little bit. However, Sun is entering, Aquarius where Saturn is. So it's going to slow down, bring difficulties, delays, and obstacles to boss, father, leadership, and the whole paradigm of that. Because we're in Aquarius, so it's like a stuck, fixed, mental energy here. The other thing is that by the end of the month, Sun, Mercury, Saturn. I think Mercury's there. Well, what's building up there is Sun, Mercury, and Saturn are going to be in the same sign of Aquarius. Now, Sun represents the central nervous system. It also, and Mercury represents the peripheral nervous system, and Saturn represents the neuromuscular junction. When you get these three planets together, you often get a lot of pain or even paralysis. Okay. Also, Sun, because it's going into Shatabisha, which is again like kind of a healing energy. It's translated as 100 healers, but when you have a malefic planet in Shatabisha, that can indicate like difficulty healing or treating some sort of illness. The Sun also represents nerves, central nervous system, heart and eyes and bones, and Mercury and Saturn represent skin and lungs, so problems breathing. This is fairly intense when you get these three. And again, because it's all in Saturn, Saturnian sign, there's going to be a suppression and also a lot of vata energy. If you do Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, there's going to be a lot of intermittent dryness and, that can bring cramping and stuff like that. Yeah. So that's what's going on there. And then February 19th, Sun enters Shatabisha. I just mentioned that. So again, illness to the above and also inner obstacles to career and soul purpose. Then February 23rd, Mars ends its retrograde. So Mars is in Gemini right now, and so that's an air sign, dual air sign, and Mars doesn't do very well in Gemini. It's an enemy sign because it's like Mars likes to take action, and Mercury's all about churning ideas. So there can be this like initiative of churning ideas, but without maybe getting any traction. So this. And when planets retrograde, we can also be considering like things in the past. So we could be like reconsidering actions of the past. But with Mars going progressive at the end of the month, we might kind of get out of this phase of kind of considering different actions and moving ahead, you know. Although Mars is moving, it's not like Mars is moving into a great sign for itself, uh, when it eventually does, because it's moving into a debilitation sign of Cancer. But again, Mars is still going to be, that's the thing is for the next, I think through the end of June, Mars is still aspecting Capricorn, where it's been aspecting for a few months. Like it's a good, like 6 to 8 months, I think, that Mars is going to be aspecting Capricorn, where it's exalted. So, something's building in Capricorn. Right now it's sort of a powder keg about to blow, in the next week or so. This week, it looks like. And I mentioned before, when you get Mars and Ketu in the same sign, that's an explosive energy. Like a couple of notable examples. Was it October of 2023 when Israel got bombed? That was a Mars Ketu moment. And then last fall, so I think it was October of 2024 when all these cell phones and walkie-talkies were blowing up in Lebanon. That was also a Mars K2 moment. So yeah, yeah, things are heating up for sure. And let's see what else we got. Okay, so here's a chart. So if you watch my talks, um, instead of just talking the complete time about, kind of abstract ideas about planets and energies and things like that, I like to include birth charts of different famous people, places, moments in time that are similar to the energies of the current sky pattern so that we can kind of download, understand how these energies are more fully embodied, on our day-to-day life planet, that sort of thing. So here's a chart for the Beatles, the rock group Beatles, their first US performance. So this happened February 9th, 1964, on 8/12. I think I have to fix that. There's too many. Hold on, let me check on that. Okay, I fixed the timing there. So it's at 8:12 p.m. New York time. Because this happened on Ed Sullivan TV show in New York City Ed Sullivan TV show back in the day. So the Lugna Nakshatra is Uttar Falguni. Uttar Falguni is symbolized by a hammock, and it's all about enjoying oneself, the finer things of life, but doing so with a purpose. So we're getting a lot of enjoyment energy already, but there's a clear purpose here as well, right? It's not just like, hey, let's play our guitars. I mean, they clearly had some agenda here, right? Of, getting more popular. The Sun Nakshatras in Dhanashta are that rhythm energy, that drum energy. So, when we have Sun in Dhanashta, that can often indicate a career in music. But again, if there's a lot of aggressive energy with it, maybe it's more of like a military, type of energy. Then Moon Nakshatra is in Purvashada. Purvashada is symbolized by a winnowing basket. So there's this kind of like shifting back and forth, sorting energy. The day lord is Sun, and the hora lord is Mars. So Sun and Mars, again, the two, fiery planets there, and you can see Sun and Mars are in the same sign in Capricorn, similar to what we have now. Right now, we have Mercury and Sun, and Mars is aspecting, but we have those three energies in Capricorn simultaneously currently. Okay. And Mars is also in Dhanashta. There's actually three planets in Dhanashta, so Sun, Mars, and Saturn. And Mars and Saturn are both combust because they're both close to the Sun. So you won't see as much aggression here. You won't see as many obstacles as here either. Okay, so that's why you might, tip the balance. If you're reading this from scratch, it would tip you in the balance of this is probably more music than like military action. But this also brings about like a very boisterous, energetic performance in the fifth house. That can be performing arts in the fifth house. Pioneering, energetic. Also, a boy band. I mean, Sun and Mars, those two male planets there. Yeah, so let's see what else. The birth shot this time is Venus, Moon, Jupiter. Okay, so Moon, where's the Moon? Moon is in with K2 in the fourth house. So the fourth house represents things like home, and K2 is there. So K2, this can be away from home. Moon represents public. Moon also represents home. Moon being in the fourth house is a karako bhavanasha moon. That can be problems with the public, problems with hospitality. Moon represents that as well. And fourth house also represents happiness. So K2 and Moon are both in Purvashada. So there's a sorting through kind of, public sorting through, some sort of hospitality away from home, that sort of thing. And Venus and Jupiter, the other parts of the birth of Shah, those two are in Pisces in the seventh house, where Jupiter is in its own sign. So Jupiter's super strong, and Venus is an exalted sign. And those are the two great natural benefics. So when you have Jupiter and Venus together like this is a lot of like, generally speaking, happy, positive energy. And these two planets are aspecting into the first house. Okay, and Jupiter, Venus is like the finer things of life, and Jupiter happens to be in a nakshatra called Revati, which is about hospitality and traveling, So this is about, taking the show on the road, essentially. Venus is art, creative endeavors, that sort of thing. Um, so this is public enjoyment, because we had that Uttara Falguni. So we're having several times over Uttara, enjoyment. The other thing is Jupiter and Venus in the seventh house. The seventh house is a kamastana, house of enjoyment. So it's like one big party, which is essentially what it was, but it was on TV, right? So, how does this chart recreate the current sky pattern? Well, I mentioned Mercury, Sun, Mars, and Capricorn. Saturn is Swan, Aquarius again. In this chart, it's combust as well. And then we have Venus and Jupiter in Pisces. Jupiter's there by aspect now. But we do have those two planetary energies in Pisces. So the Lagna rising sign is Virgo or Kanya. This is a dual earth sign. So Tusva Bhava Prithvi. This is anytime you get to Virgo in the top here, you'll have a dual energy, but in a very tangible way. Okay. And so when I was reading about this event, apparently they had two sets. So they came out the first time during the show and sang 3 songs, and they came back and sang another 2 songs. So there were literally 2 times that they played during this TV show. Okay. Let's see. The Lugna is sandhi. It's in the 1st degree, so there's some instability here. It's also aspected. Venus is debilitated here. And Venus is Uttar Bhadrapada. So Venus, even though this was like an exciting, explosive, rock and roll moment, may not have been the best, I would say, artistic moment. Let's put it that way. You know, and if you read, the reports of this, like the critics, when they saw this, they were like, well, yeah, it's sort of exciting, but they're just a flash in the pan. It's not going to last, and da 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 da. They did last. But the thing that most of the people were focusing on, like their haircuts, which were strange, and like I don't know if it was their clothes or their mannerisms, but they weren't really focusing on the music itself. So that was kind of interesting. So there's this like detachment energy, yeah. And the Venus is again artistic and diverse, and it's in this like transformational, funeral pyre energy, but being objective and being more controlled or contained or restrained, that sort of thing. So it's like, ramping things up with all this sun, Mars energy, all that fiery energy, but just keeping it contained where it's not just like, like some rock and roll people, like, they'll like drink blood or like, do all these like really harsh, violent things. I mean, they weren't quite like that, but for the day, they were out of the box, right? Um, so let's see. And then I think this Jupiter Revati, I think this is like probably I would say it is the strongest planet and really kind of any kind of glitches that are going on here. And there were some glitches, like Harrison, who provided some voice, had strep throat the day before, so he wasn't top notch. Also, I think Paul McCartney said that the mic was low, or that or maybe Lennon said that Paul's mic was. There were some microphone issues, going on too. So there were some technical issues going on. But so far with these aspecting the lugnas, it's like an unstable energy, 2 tangible outcomes. Again, perform 2 sets, but enjoyable with purpose, travel, hospitality, a transformative art, positive feelings, fun, success. I mean, because Mercury, the ruling planet of Virgo here, is in Uttarashada Nakshatra, which is a sudden, sharp, like it's symbolized by an elephant. So it's like sudden, sharp, victory. So this was considered to be the watershed moment when the Beatles just like blew up. I mean, I guess the equivalent would be somebody going viral online or something like that. That's the equivalent of this moment in time. So what else? The Lignation Mercury mentioned with Sun, combust exalted Mars. That's a lot of, deeply, even though they didn't seem like, because they were wearing suits, these are like British guys wearing suits. I mean, they weren't like, coming in with like piercings and tattoos and like, Um, so again, still restrained and contained, but deep down, fairly rebellious here, I would say, and competitive. Mars can be a competitive energy, um, that sort of thing. So, and then Sun and Mars together too, very competitive. Trying to be like, I would say the top dog here in terms of music, trying to get to the top. So what's going on here? And also, let's see. The lord of the house that Mercury, Sun, and Mars are in is in the Saturn, which is a combust uh, planet. Again, also sandhi, so that's also like some instability here. Um, and it's Swa in Aquarius in the sixth house of acute issues. So I do think, again, that's another indication that things didn't go completely to plan. But the nice thing is, whatever issues there were probably were not seen because Saturn is combust. So, that's kind of nice. So, aggressive, percussive male musical performance when we put this together, exciting, boisterous, but also I would say engineered. When you get Mars and Saturn together, you get an engineering combination because Mars is like the initiative planet, rebellious planet, energetic, action oriented planet, but Saturn is like the endurance and perseverance. So, this is somebody who can start action and keep going, keep it going. So this whole thing was, I would say, very engineered, especially when you see Mars and Saturn also showing up in the eighth house of deep psychology. So this whole thing was engineered from beginning to end. The costumes, the haircuts, the song list, the everything. So, also very strong in this chart, we've got three pancha mahapurusha yogas. I mean, each one is a royalty power yoga, but there's three in this chart. We've got Mars exalted in the fifth house. We've got Jupiter, which creates a Richika yoga. We have Jupiter in its own sign in the seventh house. That's a Hamsa yoga. We've got Venus exalted in the seventh house. That's a Malavya yoga with three pancha mahapurusha. This in and of itself, if you watch my video on this topic, Panchamahapurush Yoga, it's not often you get two, but it's very rare to get three. When you get three, that's like literally a king of kings. This is a huge, a huge thing, and the planets involved, Mars, Venus, Jupiter. Rebelliousness, innovation, pioneering, enjoyment, art, speech, singing. That's what we got here. We have other yogas as well, sarpa yoga, all the planets on one side of the Rahu Ketu axis, that's ambition. Saraswati yoga, the placement of Jupiter, Mercury, Venus, creativity. Papaveshi, that's Saturn, in the second house from the sun. That's going to bring the sun down a little bit, but not too much because Saturn's combust. Maybe internally, though, maybe they were very nervous, but you couldn't see it, or not much, apparently. Gaja Kesari, we do have that. I would say Gaja Kesari, because you have Jupiter. So Moon is in a Kendra of what is it, 1, 4, 7, 10 houses from Jupiter. But when you have Jupiter and Venus this strong, um, this gives a Gaja Kesari, not just a Kesari. This is a major networking event. This is, again, part of the reason why this is a watershed moment for their popularity, especially in the United States. We have a budhaditya yoga here, Mercury and Sun together in the fifth house, and Mercury owns the first house, so that's qualified. So when we put this all together, power, ambition, creativity, networking, intelligence, well crafted this moment. I don't think, I know that like George Harrison got into like Indian culture and all this sort of thing, but you couldn't have chosen a better moment and time than this to almost have anything happen, but to blow up, in popularity for sure. Okay, then if we look at the other house, the second house lord is exalted Venus. I would say restrained and objective to the chaos in terms of speech. So again, they may not have gone full out because, Harrison's throat was not up to par. Um, yeah, and I think they did some interviewing time as well, not just performing. So they might have held back quite a bit because I think in later days they were just like totally off the hook. But I think they were still in their light, dressed up in suits phase at this point. Then the third house lord is Mars, aspected by Swa, Saturn, and Jupiter. This could be, again, transformative writing. This is the songwriting and stuff. But there's a lot of ups and downs. But in this particular moment, since Saturn's combust, you're going to see more of the upside. Yeah, yes. Like probably more of their energetic songs, more because some of their songs are like really like deep and sad and soft, and I think they did more of their upbeat stuff. If I remember their song list, I don't remember exactly. Then the fourth house lord is Jupiter. We have Ketu here, a dark moon, a powerful shadow. So this is like really like shredding the past. But when you have Ketu and musicianship and stuff like that, um, and leaving home, but also Ketu with Moon. Literally Ketu and Rahu can symbolize on their own like mental health problems, but when you have Moon here, this is like mental, public mental health or public mania, and they literally called this moment Beatlemania. This is when it really happened. They totally blew up, and people went nuts for the Beatles after this. So you're seeing that here. Especially because Moon is also aspecting Rahu in the 10th house with, daily activity. Then the fifth house lord, we've talked about Swa, Saturn. We have an exalted combust, bhavat, bhavam, Mars with Sun, Mercury, competitive, fiery lead musical performers, multiple songwritings, Sixth house lord is Swa, Saturn. So strict schedule, but again, crafted more than spontaneous, also technical issues. Seventh house lord, Swa, bhavat, Jupiter is also bhavat, bhavam. So um, from the fourth house. So that's going to bring like one happy moment after another. And then we have an exalted karako, bhava, nasha, Venus. So Venus is strong, but there's also problems here with relationships because Venus in the seventh house can bring problems with relationships. So I think there were technical issues, but also problems here. And even though this is mostly unseen, this is also potentially signaling that even though this all looks very great, things are not 100%. And there's struggles within probably the group or with other partnerships related to this independent business. But the seventh house independent business is really on fire. The other thing is the seventh house represents, the journey through life, which I mentioned is kind of a theme, I think, for this month. When things seem like we're going off track or we're switchbacking or something like that. At this moment, whatever they did, whatever magic, whatever thoughts they had, this was the magic juice that really got them going. Now we'll see when I look at other charts later on. This is what degrades over time. Okay, so and then they lost their way, and eventually they broke up. So, but in this moment, whatever if it's crafted or not, whatever it was working. But you can see that there's some sort of premonition or preempting that things are not all 100% fantastic. So with this, again, Swa, Jupiter, and exalted Venus in the seventh house, that's still a lot of happiness and but some issues with relationships and voice, I would say. But the other thing is this massive Jupiter is not only in a kamasthana, so a house of enjoyment, but it's aspecting the other two kamassthanas. That's a lot of, happy, joyful, singing, celebrating going on here, enjoyment going on here. Then the eighth house lord is Mars. It's aspecting its own sign, making it strong in terms of musicality. But the other thing is this Mars is combust, so it's hidden. So the deep psychology, probably people were not aware of the seriously deep competitive nature of an ambition of these guys. These, what do they call it? The British invasion of American pop music. But they had a plan and they executed on the plan very well. And let's see what else. Saturn is also aspecting the eighth house. That's going to bring, again, engineering energy, but there's also quite a bit of chaos. Right now you may not see the chaos because Saturn is combust, but when Saturn comes back online, you're going to see more of this doubt, skepticism, fear, that sort of thing. So it seems like initially, at this point, they were doing things calculated and constructed, but there's still this basis of, um, following their joy, following intuition, that sort of thing. But then, eventually things went off the rails for them. The ninth house lord is Venus. I would say there's issues with authorities and religion, which, they were pretty controversial, especially when they got into like drugs and sort of alternative lifestyles and stuff like that. Then the 10th house lord is Mercury. Again, that's in the Uttarashada, sudden piercing victory, which it was, aspected by the moon, the public, emotions. But Rahu is an ardor. Ardor is symbolized by like a bolt of lightning, from the sky. So, and that's what they were essentially. Apparently, there were a lot of famous American musicians who decided to become a rock and roll singer musician because they saw this Beatles performance on TV. Like who was it? Who was on the list? Billy Joel, I think, was on that list, and Bruce Springsteen, I think, was on that list. Pretty big guys who were inspired by this performance. But again, deeply competitive craft going on here. 10th house success, unusual ambition, but electric, literally an electric moment. Um, then the 11th house lord is Moon. It's aspected by Mercury, success and words and decisions, communication, Sun, Mars, again, a lot of energy, Jupiter, expansive social, network here. Apparently, 45% of American TVs were tuned into this performance when it was happening. Again, we're talking back in the day though, when there was probably only 3 channels, so I don't know if that means so much anymore, but it was a big thing back in the day. Then the 12th house here, 12th house lord is Sun. It's aspected by Saturn and Mars again. So engineering global music success leaders. Yeah. So big moment here. A lot of positive energy, a lot of power. Again, some issues and some foreshadowing of things not going well. But in this moment, fantastic. Yeah. So yay for them. Okay, so on this slide, we're looking at what Mercury, Buddha, and Venus, Shukra are doing in February. February 3rd, Jupiter is an exact aspect on Mercury, and also Venus crosses Rahu. So with Jupiter aspecting Mercury, those are the two communication planets. I would imagine a big boost in speech, communication, publication. And Venus crossing Rahu, Venus can represent things like relationships and art, creativity, and Rahu, again, is kind of like a take a sudden left turn type thing. So there might be sudden developments as far as creativity and relationships goes. Um, I think I mentioned this before. I think it was last year or the year before when Venus crossed Rahu, because Rahu is symbolized by the head of a snake, and Venus represents things like cars and vehicles. And I remember specifically the day Venus crossed Rahu, I went out to my garage to pull up my car. I lifted up the garage door, and literally a snake almost fell. It fell. I don't know if it fell on my head, but it fell like right in front of my eyes because it was sleeping or sitting on the lip of the door of the garage. And so when I pulled up the garage door in front of me, it like right in front of my, really freaked me out. So that was a very literal moment of Venus crossing Rahu. It was almost like, the stars and planets like sort of messing with me. Like they were having fun with me, I think. But it was kind of funny though too, because I was like, well, as an astrologer, I know why that happened. Otherwise, it would just seem like some bizarre random thing. And I was like, well, bizarre random things are usually Rahu and K2 type stuff. So, yeah, and then Venus was the vehicles, and Rahu was the snake. So there you go, unexpected snake near my car. So, February 7th, Mercury enters Dhanishta, that drum-like energy. Mercury represents thoughts, decisions, communication, an exact aspect of Mars. This could be like a shifting or amplifying of rhythms, like actions, but also potentially some harsh speech. Could be, kind of firing off a gun, in terms of speech, not necessarily fire. It could be a gun, maybe, because all that heated energy that Mars and Sun and Ketu are in the, Capricorn. It could be, but this is, again, we're talking about Mercury here, so it's thoughts, speech, decisions, that sort of thing. Um, getting heated. Then February 11th, Mercury enters Aquarius or Kumbh. That'll be nice for a couple of reasons. One, it's a friend sign. It's a, well, Capricorn is also a friend sign for Mercury. It's still a friend sign, but with Saturn. So this is going to slow down decisions, speech, and thoughts. So it was like really heated, like really churning. Mercury was really churning with Mars and Ketu and Sun, and now it's moving into like Saturn territory where it's going to like slow down. So it's going to be pretty swift change or big change. Sun will come in the next day, so Sun will follow. So there'll still be some energy. The other thing is when Mercury enters Aquarius, we're going to lose the K2 5-9 aspect, and K2 brings a lot of chaos. So it's been fairly chaotic the last few weeks when Mercury's been in Capricorn. It's been about a couple weeks, I guess, and then we're going to move out of that temporarily for a few weeks, a couple weeks until Mercury gets back into Pisces. Okay, so it'll cool down a little bit, slow things down a little bit, kind of be more reconsidered rather than like reactive, because that seems like, it's just a powder keg again, what's going on in Capricorn. Then February 14th, Mercury enters Shatabhisha Nakshatra. Again, that's the 100 healers energy. So there may be difficulties with mercurial things. So speech, pain, arm, hands, skin, breathing, those sorts of things. Decision making. Yeah, that could be going on. Then February 22nd, Mercury enters Purva Drapada. So there might have been difficulty in Shatabhisha, but now it's going to get like, sort of to the tipping point where it's like, it's either going to increase or it's going to end. Whatever was sort of building here, the energy building here in Aquarius, it's going to go one way or the other, finally make a decision. This could also mean the end of a friendship or business, potentially. Then 24th through 25th of February, Mercury and Saturn are planetary war because they're in the same degree. This is graha yuddha. And the thing is, they're both going to be kamba. So there's going to be, again, probably some ending of a friendship or business or communication, but it's not something that you see. So this might be like, like a friendship, like maybe like a friend and they do or say something and you just decide within yourself that they're not really a friend. But you wouldn't necessarily say anything. Nobody else would necessarily know. But internally, you know what's going on. So it could be that. Um, then February 26th, Mercury leaves combustion, so it's going to come back online. So all this internal churning that's been going on with Mercury now, somebody's ready to like speak up or share their decisions or plans. Then February 27th, Mercury enters Pisces or Mina. This is an enemy sign for, not an enemy sign, sorry. This is a debilitation sign for Mercury. So confusion, swimming in a, pool of emotions, a lot to process, trying to move forward, maybe not doing a great job, definitely not a straight line. Yeah, so what's going on for Mercury? Mostly Mercury. And again, not a lot going on with Venus. Again, Venus crosses Rahu at the beginning of the month, end of the month, or beginning of next month, March 1st, Venus goes retrograde. So when Venus goes retrograde, that means Venus is going to spend February, March, April, May, almost 4 months in Pisces where it's exalted. That's nice. The only thing about that is that um, it's going to spend 3.5 months, most of that time, in either Purva Bhadrapada or Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra, which again are the two funeral pyre, you know, um, energies. It's not in Revati. Just the last 2 weeks of May, it's going to be in Revati. Revati is like the, traveling and hospitality and goodwill. um, so again, Venus can represent finances, finer things of life, luxury goods, art, vehicles, pets, relationships, a lot of good stuff. So a lot of that kind of stuff's going to be renewed, or reviewed, maybe renewed, or maybe just released, because especially when you have uccha bhadrapada, that's like a conscious release type energy. So it's almost like a downsizing or minimalizing, or what's truly important, like let the fluff go, kind of energy. And what's also kind of interesting, is just a day or two ago we had, right after right after Venus moved into Pisces, because Pisces is a dual water sign. Okay, Venus represents vehicles. Venus also represents the arts. There is this bizarre, and it's with Rahu, which again is this bizarre, strange energy, like the snake falling on my head when I went to my garage. Two vehicles, a helicopter and an airplane, collided over the Potomac River. They both landed in the river, and the airplane was full of artists. They were world-class figure skaters. I mean, such a bizarre, that's one of those things where it's like, how did you get a whole plane full of art? I mean, when does it happen that you get a plane full of artists, like ice skaters on one plane? I mean, that's probably very strange, very unusual. And then just so happens that they collide with a helicopter over water. And again, that's right when Venus moved into Pisces. So, yeah, so you can see how some of these energies are playing out in the real world. Okay, so on this slide, we have another Beatles moment. So somehow that became, I'm not even really a Beatles fan, really. I don't hardly know anything about them, but somehow that sort of became a thing for this month. So this month's talk. So this chart is for the Beatles' last concert, and it was on a rooftop in London. So of their, I guess, studio. Okay, they did some concert up there. This happened January 30th, 1969, 12:30 p.m., so right about noon, in London. So the Lugna nakshatra is in Kritika. So Kritika is a dual nakshatra. It's kind of like a fighting energy and a nurturing energy simultaneously. So it can go back and forth. So there's like a fight and nurture both energy. This might be a conflicted energy, which apparently they didn't even know until the last minute that they were actually going to get up there and actually do this concert. It was just very impromptu, very casual. Like they didn't announce it. It was like a pop up. I guess it was like a pop up type concert and that sort of thing. Um, and the other thing that's interesting is that they played for about 42 minutes. And within 2 or 3 minutes, so the 12:30 time is when they walked up onto the roof. Okay. Within a few minutes, less than five, I believe, the nakshatra shifts from Kritika to Rohini. So again, Rohini is that attractive, seductive, energy. And then right about when Rohini shifted into Mrigashirsha, is when the impromptu concert ended, and I'll talk about that. Okay. So, so anyway, I just thought it was interesting that basically the 42 minutes they had happened almost entirely in Rohini. I just put the 12:30 time because they didn't have a more specific time than this. But within a few minutes, it's Rohini, essentially. Okay. Um, so the sun nakshatra is in Shravana. There's an oral tradition here. Moon nakshatra is in Ardra. Ardra, again, is that thunderbolt. It was a shocking kind of public event, which they did. But Ardra is also associated with sadness. Okay, so there's a kind of public surprise, but also sad energy going on here. The day lord is Jupiter, Hora lord is Venus. So let's see, Jupiter is in Virgo this time. Venus is in Pisces, so it's exalted, and Jupiter is aspecting Venus. So it's almost like you have Jupiter and Venus again in Pisces. Okay. And because it's in the fifth house, Jupiter's in the fifth house, and the 11th, and Venus is in the 11th house, public performance for clubs, groups, society, so group performance here. Then the Berta Shahs, Rahu, Mercury, Venus, Venus. Now, Rahu's in the 11th house, again, ambition in clubs, groups, society, networking, income, that sort of thing. Mercury is in the 9th house of authority, and I think it's in Shravana as well. I believe it's in Shravana as well. One, two. Yeah, I think so. I think Mercury's in Shravana as well. And then Venus is, also in the 11th house. There's a lot of 11th house, club, group, society, income type energy here. Also gambling. 11th house is also gambling. Um, and Venus and Rahu. So again, that unexpected, bizarre, because it was very strange. Apparently, like they just went up to the rooftop in the middle of the day when people were having their lunch, because this was Thursday, like again, like a pop-up concert or whatever, and people didn't even really know what's going on. Yeah. Until I guess a few minutes later. Um, so yeah, and but this I would say ambitions, speaking, art, those kinds of energies. So how this creates a current sky pattern? Well, you have Sun, Mercury, Mars, and Capricorn again. Mars by aspect, kind of like it is now. Jupiter's aspecting Venus and Taurus. Rahu and Ketu are on the Pisces Virgo axis. Venus is in Pisces. Saturn will move into Pisces at the end of March 2025. And in this chart, Saturn is on Venus, Jupiter, Taurus, and Sagittarius. So the Saturn now, it's not combust. Now Saturn is suppressing all this benefic. So this is almost like the opposite energy of the last, Ed Sullivan TV show concert that they did. Because now Saturn, like you have Jupiter and Venus, aspecting or in, Pisces aspecting each other. That all seems good. But now you have Saturn squelching all that goodness, essentially. Yeah. So yeah, so let's take a look. So the Lugna is Taurus or Vrishabha. And they had like a little garden or something, up on the top. I guess it's because Taurus can be that kind of storage and gardening type energy. Fixed Earth, so again, solid, tangible. These people keep trying to produce solid, tangible results. But the thing is, Taurus is aspected by K2 and Uttara Falguni. That's where it currently is today. So again, there's bringing this enjoyment energy with a purpose, but again, there's this like strange twist. And what you'll see is Rahu, not only is K2 5-9 away, is aspecting 5-9 away in this moment, but Rahu is also aspecting 5-9 away. That's going to bring a lot of that weird, strange, unusual energy to the whole chart. Okay. But K2 is bringing it to the Lugna, which again, the Lugna, brings a tone or energy to the whole chart. Then, let's see. Retrograde Jupiter is also aspecting the Lugna, and Jupiter is in Hasta. Hasta is symbolized by hand. So this is all about like trying to take back control, like trying to bring back grace, maybe even bring back song, like speech, goodness, bring back goodness. And Mars is aspecting there. Mars and Vishaka. Vishaka is an energy. It's a victorious energy, but like victory at all costs. So this is like feels very forced, like it's a very bizarre, forced type of way to try to essentially make a comeback. Is what I'm trying to see here. Is what I'm seeing here. So trying to get control, get the magic back. That's what I kept feeling like. Revitalize a chaotic situation because they were like fighting. I mean, and this was only a few years. Like within 5 years, like it all kind of went to pot essentially. Down the tubes for these guys. So really, again, blew up and then it all went haywire for them. The lugnation is exalted Venus. It's an Uttar drop. So again, there's it's chaos, contained chaos energy with Rahu and Saturn. Saturn's in Revati, aspect Raju. It's unusual ambition to step towards global social support, but suppressed, tired. Like this can be like whatever they're doing, like people are getting tired of it. Like it's kind of old news. Like even though they kind of went from these guys wearing like it's in a very quick amount of time, they went from these guys wearing like these suits with kind of weird haircuts to being pretty deep into like, drug and, alternative lifestyle stuff. And, they went really kind of sideways with it, again. And I don't think they realized what exactly they had, or they didn't stick with what they had, and why it was working, or they may not have realized what was actually working for them. Yeah. So, Yeah, so again, they ran 42 minutes of the sets. It was mostly during Rohini. And then what happened was a cop showed up and like told them they had to stop playing because they didn't have a permit or something. So I mean, and that again is like Saturn squelching Venus and squelching Jupiter and squelching, Taurus. That's Saturn, creating delays and obstacles to all this benefic energy, which again is like, it was combust in the last one, last term. So there is a Kala Sarpa yoga, so still ambition, budhaditya, intelligence, Kesari, networking, but there's no solar lunar yogas here, so there's no real support of the mind or purpose or career. Um, Rahu and Ketu all over the place, like very bizarre moment. Also, maybe this was like drugs and alcohol, who knows? Like maybe they were high when they decided to do this, very ad hoc, spontaneous thing that they did. Um, and this is the last time they performed together and as a group in public. So, that was also probably pretty sad for the public. They probably didn't know at the time. They may not have known at the time that was going to be the last time, but yeah, I think they were only together for like another year or so before Paul McCartney announced that he was doing his own thing or taking off from the group. So let's just look at the other houses real quick. The second house lord's combust Mercury. The moon is an ardor, again, sad, shocking speech, public in the public. Um, let's see, third house lord is moon. Again, sadness here. So, it might have been a sad moment, but again, this might be a precursor for this is like the end of the road, essentially. Like this can't keep going on like this. This is like too chaotic and, just, you know, uh, not as well engineered. Not as well, nearly as well engineered. Do we have Saturn and Mars anywhere? Yeah, actually, Saturn and Mars. Oh, see, there you go. Saturn, Mars, K2, and Jupiter are, yeah, in the first house. Explosive. It was like designed to explode, but like it backfired on them essentially. It didn't like blow up the way like that Sullivan show thing blew up for them in a positive way. It blew up in a negative way. Sidelined them essentially forever. So let's see. Third Lord, Moon aspecting Sun, Mercury, Rahu. So issues with instruments and hands. They kept doing like multiple takes of songs, and I don't know what that's about. I don't know if they were just playing around or I don't know what's going on. But the fourth house Lord is Sun. And again, Sun is in what is it? Shravana, so past oral tradition. So again, I think they're trying to get back to where they were. They've really lost control of the group and themselves and their musicality and creativity and all that. I think it's all really dwindled here. The fifth house lord is a bhavam Mercury. So it's like one playing over and over again, one song, one thing after another. There's also a karako Jupiter. So this could be trouble with counseling, with kids, that sort of thing. K2's there. It's also aspect by Saturn and Venus. So multiple takes of projects, also long-term issues with counsel. So not only do we have a Jupiter that's a Karko Bhavanasha, but we have a Sun that's Karko Bhavanasha. And the Sun in the ninth house Karko Bhavanasha, that's going to bring issues with authority, leadership. So I think that their manager had passed away, and that's part of why they really lost it, I think. Because they were innovative. They were too Martian, I think. Like they were innovative and they were um, rebellious and all this kind of thing. But again, in the first concert, Mars was combust. You can see it. Now Mars is like right in your face. So that deeper kind of like subdued rebelliousness that was maybe more palatable for people. Now it's just sort of like, they're really getting wild and out there, more than most people can take, I guess. So, because this is still, well, it's the 60s, there were some people who were into this, but maybe they were getting too, alternative rather than mainstream, not mainstream enough at this point, before they were mainstream enough with their suits or whatever. And now it's just like, they're completely unhinged. So let's see, what else do we have? So sixth house Lord of bhavam Venus. Oh, wait. Venus should be. Let me double check here. 1, 2. Oh, the Lord. Sorry, the Lord is a bhavam Venus. So this is like one problem after another. Sorry. Yeah. So the Lord of the success is bhavam Venus. So one problem after another with the public and performances and income and all. So there's a lot of issues going on here. And Venus represents partners and finance. So yeah, a lot of people probably in the mix giving them bad advice. Looks like nobody can seem to get them straighten them out. Then the seventh house Lord Mars, aspected by Rahu. Again, ambition, but like a unknown, strange road ahead. And Mars is the Lord of the seventh house, and Mars is in a negative house. So it's like, again, unusual forced attempt to ameliorate issues, but I don't know to what effect. Like it seems pretty ineffective. That's what I'm seeing here, because Mars is in a negative house. There's ambition, but there's not always like a great plan or execution on that. Then eighth house Lord is Jupiter, and it's aspected by Moon and Saturn. So, sadness, skepticism, doubt, fear. I think that's what was driving this. Before it was just like, kind of raw ambition and, a calculated thing. And now, again, these folks are so all over the place, they can't seem to get their act together. Literally, they're together. Um, then let's see, the ninth house Lord is Saturn. We have a retrograde combust Mercury, karako, bhava, nashaya, Sun, aspect by Ketu, Mars. Like a lot of, again, this explosive energy that we're experiencing now. This is in their leadership house. Explosive, chaotic issues of management authority, like even the cops showing up. I mean, that's them busting up their party. Then the 10th house Lord is Saturn. And Saturn's in Revati. This is like, fading into the sunset. And the 10th house is like daily activity. So it's like the Saturn is like suppressing, their work, and their fans and their income. And, Saturn's a slow moving planet. So this isn't going to happen. It's not like you drop off a cliff. It's going to be a slow, demise, essentially. I would think that there's also denial here because Saturn's with Rahu. But there could also be this like obsessive work tendency, which isn't surprising because they were so fiery in the beginning, and there's still a lot of fieriness, but now it's turning against them because Mars is now not combust and Saturn's not now combust. So those things that were hidden, Mars and Saturn, like that kind of conniving, calculating energy that drove them forward. Now you can see the Mars and Saturn. You can see the chaos on the surface, and the ambition. Uh, Whereas before it was just, these sort of quirky guys, I think, from UK. So let's see. Jupiter's aspecting its own sign. So even though the 11th house is strong, I mean, Jupiter's aspecting its own sign. You have an exalted Venus, but Rahu and Saturn are there. You're suppressing group activity. The 12th house, the Lord is Mars, aspect its own house, which is nice. It gives it strength in terms of protection of losses, like physical, intangible losses, but Mars represents enemies. So this is losses through partners who've become enemies, essentially. So I don't know. It looks like they were losing support from people. If not, people actively turning against them. Yeah. So very different energy, and it's kind of interesting because a lot of the planets are in similar positions or similar lineups, but take a couple of planets that aren't combust and make them combust, or the other way around, and shift a few energies and you get a totally different outcome. So there you go. Sort of beginning, or not really the beginning, the Ed Sullivan TV show. They had been working together for a long time before they went on TV. So that was just kind of like a peak moment. But this is like, clearly the beginning of the end type thing. Okay, so the moon in February, we've got a full moon coming, Purnima, February 12th. It's going to be in Cancer Karka, so its own sign. That's going to be nice. The only thing is moon is gandanta. It's in the last few degrees of Cancer, so that's going to be unstable. So there's some strength and protection, but instability as well. And it's going to be in Ashlesha. Ashlesha can indicate like mental emotional health issues for the public. So there might be something kind of shocking or stressful there. Again, for the new and full moon video, new and full moon every month, I do separate videos. So if you want in-depth stuff on the moon, I would go to those videos when they pop up for you. Then February 27th, there's a new moon around Bastion Aquarius or Kumbh. So right in line with this, Saturn and all this jazz going on in Shatabisha. So difficulties with mental emotional health. It's a neutral sign for the moon. Sun's going to be there with a swa Saturn. So again, two, pretty strong malefics on the moon. This might be suppression of harsh feelings or emotions, loss of support, because again, it creates a sati sati, difficulties or loss of leader, father, boss, career, because the sun is like involved with all this. So there's like some sort of emotional, but maybe suppressed emotions are related to all this. And then again, just to give you a heads up, we've got 2 eclipses coming in March. And so you might want to see my eclipse videos if you want to know how to work with that energy from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective. Okay, and then we have the slow moving planets here. So Jupiter, Guru, Saturn, Shani, Rahu, Ketu. February 3rd, Jupiter has an exact aspect on Mercury. Venus crosses Rahu. I mentioned a little bit before. Yeah, I had these slides ordered in a different way, and so I'm trying to sort of think backwards in a way. But Jupiter exact aspect on Mercury, again, explosive story, news regarding father, boss, authority, government, because this is all that Sun, Mars, K2 business in the Capricorn. Then Venus crossing Rahu, I've talked about unexpected conscious release of relationship, art, even clothes. Venus represents clothes, vehicles, pets, like, cleaning out your clothes or closet or something like that. February 4th, Jupiter ends retrograde. That's pretty big because Jupiter has been in Rohini and Taurus for quite a while, which has been nice. It's been a bit of a saving grace for the most part. Now, instead of going backwards, Jupiter's going forward. So how we develop more stable growth and finances, maybe even laws potentially. February 11th, Mercury enters Aquarius. I mentioned that ends the K2 5-9 aspects. It's a friend sign, a fixed air sign. End of old thought because again, Saturn in Aquarius for 2.5 years. That's a big, big paradigm shift, and this is the last gasp of that essentially. End of an old thought, paradigm, decision, business, potentially unusual recent activities and aggression may calm. Um, Basically because Saturn's slowing things down. Like it's going to be like a sort of whiplash for Mercury because Mercury's going from, Sun, Mars, K2 to, Swa, Saturn. I mean, that's like almost a diametrically opposed energy there. That's a lot of stress on Mercury, which again is a rational analytical mind. And February 23rd, Saturn goes Kamba. So again, this may seem like external obstacles are removed or resolved, but inner anxiety, doubts, fear may be increased. And once Saturn goes back up online at the end of March, it might be like waking up to a whole new world. Because again, on March 29th, there's going to be a solar eclipse. And this is all happening within 5 hours. Solar eclipse, then Saturn ends combustion, so it comes back online, and then Saturn shifts to Pisces, all within like 5 hours. That's like, whoosh. So yeah, hold on to your hats for that one, folks. 24th through 25th of February, Saturn, Mercury, and planetary war. Again, end of ideas, friendship, business internally, because they're both combos, strong negative internal dialogue potentially. So be careful of that for yourself. 27th of February, Mercury enters Pisces. So K2 goes back to 5-9 aspects when that happens. But again, Mercury is debilitated in Pisces, so you may not know what to think, or there's a lot of confusion, obsession because Rahu's going to be there, sorting through emotions of the fallout of everything that's just been going on. So, trying to make sense of it all, essentially. A lot to process, so yeah. And then here, since we're on this sort of Beatles theme, George Harrison's birth chart actually has a lot of similarities to the current sky pattern. So I thought, well, since we're sort of on that, we've done two Beatles charts. Why not make it a hat trick, right? So George Harrison was born February 25th, 1943, at 10 minutes a.m. in the morning, Liverpool, UK. His Lugna nakshatra is in Swati. That's symbolized by fresh grass blowing in the wind. Very fragile energy. And so I think he was a fragile being, frankly. Probably quite nervous as well, because he also has Saturn in the eighth house of deep psychology. Yeah, so, probably a nervous guy. Um, then Sun nakshatra is in Shatabishag, an illness. And he did have a lot of health issues, actually. Moon nakshatra is in Swati. And so the moon in nakshatra definitely brings more of like a mental fragility. And this moon right in the top there brings imagination for sure. It's aspected by Jupiter. So moon and Jupiter together are going to be like compassion and, kindness. It's also going to bring intuition. K2 aspect in there. I mean, there could be like literally even psychic energy going on for this guy. But when you have again Moon and K2 together, that can bring mental health and emotional issues. The day lord is Mercury. Hora lord is Saturn. So Mercury and Saturn you see in the fourth house here, a combination of home, but also, family lineage. So it looks like he comes from a family lineage of storytellers. And Mercury and Saturn also meet up in the 10th house of career and day to day activities. Also in the 10th house, you have the aspect of Mars. So again, Mars and Saturn together, engineering. Mars is in nakshatra of Uttarashada, so there's success here. Although Mars is sandhi, it's unstable because it's in the almost last degree of Sagittarius. Mars is also karako bhava, so issues with siblings or friends like siblings, like his, bandmates probably. Um, so there's that drive, rebellious energy, but Mars is also debilitated in Cancer in the 10th house. So there's an erratic quality to it. Saturn is also there, so there's engineering, and Saturn's in Rohini. So it's like beautiful structures, beautiful traditional structures he's bringing. And he actually introduced like classical Indian medicine into some of these pop rock, songs that they were doing. So really kind of changed the vibe. So yeah, Mars and Saturn engineering and Mercury words, and Mercury is in Shravana, so storytelling, constructing structures of words and storytelling, for his songwriting essentially. Um, yeah, let's see what else. The Burtasha, Rahu, Saturn, Venus. So Rahu's in the 11th house of clubs, group, society. Rahu's also Sandhi, being in the first degree of the sign. Rahu's also in Magan Nakshatra, which is symbolized by a throne. So, being icon, essentially, being a world leader icon. Um, and let's see, Saturn again is in the 8th house of deep psychology. It's aspecting a second house of speech. So he was actually considered to be the quieter silence beetle. He didn't talk a lot, but he did do some voice work, for them. I think the thing that was he started off as an instrumentalist, and then he did some voice, and then he got into songwriting. So, and then some, I think, production work and that sort of thing. So there's a evolution for him. And so he also had a winding path. If we're talking about winding paths here. So some sort of unusual or hidden structural type art. When I see Saturn and Rohini, I usually think of like sculptors. So he was all about like constructing, stories and songs. Yeah. So how does his chart represent the current sky pattern? Well, we have Sun in Aquarius, Venus in Pisces. That's the same. Saturn is in Aquarius through aspect. Mercury's in Capricorn, and Mars is in Gemini. So we've got a handful of things that are similar. So his lagna, he was a Libra rising or Tula, movable air sign. So a lot of ideas. He was an idea guy. And again, with this Moon, Jupiter, Ketu mix, pretty wild mindset, I would say. Yeah. And his chart, kind of like, was it like the last chart? The rooftop concert chart? Yeah. His chart, similarly, he has K2 5-9 aspects away and Rahu. That means he has Ketu and Rahu almost on half of his chart. Very unusual. Usually when I see that with somebody, I'm like, this is usually a pretty unusual person. Some people will say like oddball. It's not always like negative. Oddball is sort of a negative thing in my mind. Just a very unusual, you know, dancing to the beat of their own drum type person, like just very, and he was, I think maybe he was the most unusual, like in terms of like him getting into all sorts of like traditional music and trying to incorporate traditional Indian music with like rock music. And that's like pretty wild stuff. So, yeah, anyway, very much an idea person, a lot, huge imagination and intuition. Um, and, the thing I was surprised about was that Rahu and Ketu are not aspecting his second house of things that you eat. It's not aspecting his sixth house of daily activities, and it's not aspecting his 12th house of losses and expenditures. Because usually when I see Rahu or Ketu in 2, 6, or 12, I would a lot of times think like drug use. And there's plenty of drug use, but I think at some point he just decided it wasn't for him and like just quit cold turkey or something like that. Although he was smoked his entire life, which, we'll talk about the fourth house of the lungs and chest. But yeah, anyway, so he's a Libra rising, idea person, bright moon, Sandhi, though, Sandhi K2 is aspecting here. K2's in Dhanashta. So this is like unusual music, unusual rhythms, foreign rhythms, especially when you have Saturn aspecting Aquarius here. I mentioned when you get Saturn in its own sign in Capricorn or Aquarius, you can often get like indications of people interested in things that were related to Indian culture, which is exactly what he ended up doing, going down that path. So then the Lugna also retrograde Jupiter and Punarvasi. This is a lot of traveling musician. So you put this all the unusual innovator, intuitive traveling musician, large imagination, mental health, churning, psychic. That's the kind of stuff you're getting in the first house here. The Lugnatia ruling planet for the chart is an exalted Venus. That's an Uttar Bhadrapada. So again, containing the chaos a bit. That's the art of containing chaos. It's gone to the sixth house of acute issues, but also it's a moksha sthana, so house of freedom. Really free, especially with this K2 moon, very, and again, pretty wild mind here, like, um, and he channeled it mostly, I think, positive directions, which is great. So acute chronic issues, daily creative schedule, aspected by Mars. A lot of like passion here, but also I think he was probably one of the ones trying to smooth over fights with siblings, friends, probably his bandmates. A bit of a mediator, although he himself got into some rows with people. Um, they all did, so at some point, right? Then what's also interesting is there's a Kamadruma lunar yoga. So there's no true planets on either side of the moon. And except for Mercury, there's no planets in Kendras from the moon. This can often indicate somebody who feels unsupported or feels alone. So, that may have been true. Hard to verify that, but um, yeah, then there's a Subhabayachari solar yoga here. So Sun is supported because there's two benefics, Mercury and Venus on either side, and the second and 12th house from it. That's going to bring some support too. Again, Sun. Sun is like career. Yeah. Kesari, wait, one. Oh, that's not true. I need to remove that. So he might have felt like, again, not much mental or emotional support, but there was career support for him. Yeah. So again, not super um, strong chart, but I haven't looked at the subchart, so maybe that's where a lot of his you know success came from, essentially. So let's see the other houses now. Okay, so let's see. So the second house lord is Mars, aspected by Saturn. So again, quiet, probably few close associates, really, even though he was surrounded by gobs of people, like people that were truly close to him, I'm guessing, were not too many. The third house lord Jupiter aspects its own house, bhavat, bhavam, karako, bhava, nashaya, Mars, and uccha, shata, and the sandhi, Rahu, in Magat. This is like prolific publishing, writing, successful leader, in an unusual way, innovative speech and philosophy, but also issues with siblings and also dexterity. So all the like stringed instruments he was playing, like guitar and sitar and all this kind of stuff. Then the fourth house lord is Saturn. Mercury's there in Shravana, so family of storytellers. Also, there was some when I was looking for his birth chart info, there was some information that at some point he said he had his chart, I guess, analyzed in India since he was there with, and matched with his partner or something like that to get more info there. And then it was rectified, but then somebody showed up with I think his sister or something said, "Well, we have your birth certificate. Like, why are you changing, this kind of." So I think there's some confusion there. Um, um, so his time might have been like I think 20 minutes earlier than this, but it still lands him in um, Libra. Tula is a rising sign, ascendant of the lugna for him. And just to verify, like I check other parts of somebody's life, other areas of somebody's life to make sure that the chart makes sense. So his mom was a shopkeeper. So Mercury in Capricorn could be a shopkeeper. The other thing is Jupiter and Purnavasu with Mars and K2 aspecting there in his ninth house of father. His father was traveling a lot because he worked with like buses and ships and stuff like that. So like I think carrying cargo. Um, so yeah, so I think again that this is the right rising sign for him. It's just that when you're looking for the correct information, you read these different stories, and then you got to figure out like which one do you actually believe, and then what makes sense when you see the chart. So okay, so then the fifth house lord is Saturn. It's aspect its own sign. Then we have Sandhi Ketu and Sun there in Shatabisha. Problems with heart, lungs, upper GI, cancer. He had multiple cancers. Like I think the throat was the first one, and then eventually the lungs and the brain, I think. Um, Also, again, what I mentioned, performing unusual traditional music, essentially. Um, yeah. Then the sixth house lord is Jupiter. Venus aspected by Mars, so trying to contain chaos. And he writes his art was about like taking problems and writing about them. You know, Venus, oh sorry, the seventh house lord is Mars, aspected by Moon and Rahu. So there's ambitious public, pioneering relationships and business. Although I think probably problematic because Mars, the lord of the seventh house, and Rahu aspecting seventh, they're both Sandhi, they're both unstable. So instability here, I would say. Um, Although again, he started off on Rahu, so he's going to pick up energies of the third house, which is, his guitar, string instrument playing. The 11th house of socializing, even though he's quiet and kind of ambitious in social circles. And then also the seventh house of independent business and relationships. So, and then after Rahu, what he run Jupiter. So that's when the speech, more of this, vocal stuff came in, and the songwriting came in was when he started running Jupiter. So that makes sense, yeah. So then the eighth house lord is Venus, and the thing is, Venus is in the sixth house. So this could be acute problems becoming chronic, like things not really getting solved. Saturn's in Rohini. So again, sculpting art through troubles or because of troubles. He's kind of a magician or alchemist of taking troubling things and turning them into beautiful songs that people want to listen to, and buy records about, Then the ninth house lord is Mercury. Jupiter's there, aspected by Ketu and Mars. So again, explosive dual authority. Again, I think he was very rebellious in many ways, and so left his probably the authorities that were, the authorities around him when he grew up, and then followed other ones. Like, I don't know how far he went, with like Indian traditions, but I know the whole group Beatles went to India to learn about transcendental meditation and this sort of thing. I mean, that was pretty far out there at the time. Let's see. Yeah, then the 10th house lord is Moon, so public career, aspected by Mars, Mercury, Saturn. So again, this is, I think, his songwriting, engineering success of words and emotions. Although because you have the two malefics, Mars and Saturn, on the 10th house, this isn't going to be like a regular 9 to 5 job type guy. Then the 11th house lord is Sun, aspect its own house. It's going to be strong. And Sun, again, Leo is a stage, and Sun is a career. So there's a lot of ambition towards, a stage, public group, people, career, from the get go, because that's what he was born into. He's Rahu, yeah. But I would say unstable, like unstable stage leader. And again, I think that comes in with the, um, him being a Swati person. Swati people generally pretty fragile creatures, nervous and uh, fragile creatures typically. Then let's see, the 12th house. Mercury is the lord of the 12th house, aspected by Venus, where it's debilitated. So again, dual losses through art and relationships for him. Yeah, again, this is the, I think, darker underbelly of all this shiny, glamorous potential, at least on the surface lifestyle that they led. Yeah, so started as a guitarist and then added voice and songwriting, voice first and songwriting, got really into songwriting, so had a pretty successful solo career after the Beatles broke up. And again, went on to integrate like traditional music, like Indian music, into, pop rock music, which is pretty cool. Um, So, again, just to verify the chart, I was looking at different things. So he had this like very strange event happen to him December 30th, 1999. Somebody invaded his home who had some mental, like was schizophrenic or some pretty deep mental health issues and stabbed him like 40 times in the chest, like punctured his lung. I think part of his lung had to be removed. And so when I see that, when I see chest, when I see lung, when I see home invasion, I see fourth house. And what planet was he running at that time? He was running Mercury, and that's where Mercury sits. Okay. Then I was just checking to see when I looked at the transit for that time period, Mercury, Sun, and K2 were in Capricorn, kind of like now, like explosive energy. Okay. And for him, it happened in, because Capricorn with these planets was fourth house for him, his home, explosive energy, tangible, and, just out of control, essentially. And Mercury can represent lungs and breathing, so problems there. Sun, and Shatabisha, general problems to health, key to like bizarre, strange, unusual, events. Um, And then the other thing that was going on at that time. Oh, and I was like, well, that's, why was that activated? Because it's still pretty bizarre. I mean, we don't have K2 or Rahu aspecting the fourth house, but then I was looking for eclipses since eclipses are coming up. Because you can see that Sun and K2 are pretty close together. So I was like, oh, it looks like he's close to an eclipse here. So there was a an eclipse that happened January 21st, so a few weeks after this December 30th. So in sort of shadow period of the January 2000 eclipse is when this guy entered his home and stabbed him a bunch of times. And the eclipse happened in Capricorn and also Cancer, because you can see Ketu and Rahu are unstable. And so within a few weeks, they're going to still be unstable, but they're going to be unstable in Capricorn and Cancer, which is when this whole thing went down. The other thing is that because Mars is on the line there, Mars slips into Saturn, or slips into Capricorn. So you have Mars, Sun is not there. I need to change that. Sorry, it should be Mercury, Mars, Ketu. Mercury, Mars, Ketu, and Capricorn. And when Mars gets into Capricorn, why am I getting confused now? Hold on. There's some parivartana. Saturn's debilitated. Does it go retrograde? Hold on a second. Let me check something here. Okay, I figured out why I was confused. So I was confusing his chart with the transit chart. Okay, and I don't have the transit chart up here, but in my head, I was getting the two confused. So at the time when the home invader came in, December 30th, Saturn was in Aries, where it's debilitated. Okay. And so that debilitated Saturn is aspecting his lugna of general health. It's also aspecting the fourth house of home and happiness. And when Mars goes into Capricorn and Saturn is already in Aries, you're going to have a parivartana exchange of houses between Mars and Saturn. So you're going to have Mars and Saturn all over the chart. So Mars and Saturn all over the chart, Rahu and Ketu all over the chart. That's a lot of like aggressive action with weapons, unusual aggression with weapons. Could very well be. So anyway, again, just to verify, the chart, again, it looks like he definitely was a Libra rising, although maybe a few minutes off, who knows. Yeah, so anyway, pretty interesting guy, that's for sure. I mean, his career, is cool, but I don't know, it just seemed like philosophically he was a pretty interesting guy. So I don't know. This is the most I've ever known about the Venus, like just doing the astrology about them. So that's about it, all I know. Okay, so that's what's going on in the sky this month. So if you like to be your own astrologer, again, a lot of the action is happening in Capricorn, Makara, Aquarius, Kumbh, and Pisces and Meena this month. So what you can do is you can get a free chart, your free chart, Vedic chart, off the internet, various places. If it's a North Indian style chart, you can use this. This is a little diagram. So the first house again, top diamond in the middle. The other houses you count counterclockwise inclusively to get the second, third, fourth house, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I've just written down here just a few words on what each of these houses represents. Now I have whole videos, on each of these houses if you want to go into depth. But for example, I've been mentioning the seventh house. Seventh house represents spouse, partnership, independent business. Okay. So if you have Capricorn in the seventh house, meaning you're a Cancer rising, okay, then, there might be some explosive stuff going on for you, frankly, in the realm of spouse, partnership, independent business in next month. If not now, because that energy is already building up there. If you have a second house, okay, family, speech, wealth, food, drink, and it's in Pisces, meaning you're, what would you be in? Aquarius rising. You might be actually having a hard time controlling what you eat and drink, frankly, because you have Rahu and Jupiter in its own sign with Venus and Rahu there. So there can be a lot of ambition and also like just partying and party food and that sort of thing. Also speech, there could be a lot of just uncontrolled speech. Um, Although there might be a lot of time with friends and family, potentially. Okay. So you can see how this goes. Anyway, if you are your own astrologer, just make sure that you don't scare yourself, freak yourself out with anything. Just pick a planet or pick a house or pick a sign, anything that's interesting to you, and just, follow it. Follow your chart, through the next month and take some notes and just see how these different energies are playing out for yourself. Okay. So on this slide, I have the 1-7 bhava house axis, the 2-8 axis, the 3-9 axis, and then on the next slide, I have the 4-10 axis, the 5-11 axis, and the 6-12 axis. Again, these are just a few words, just a general brief nugget overview of the houses. And if you want a lot more information, each house has their own video to get deep into it. Alrighty. So as always, thanks so much for stopping by, listening to one of my talks. I appreciate all the different ways that you guys support my work and the channel. Um, from watching videos and liking them, subscribing, sharing them, sending in donations, posting comments. It's all very much appreciated. Again, all my teaching videos on the subject are in the concepts playlist that can be found there. For more famous charts, I would check out my birth chart archive list 2024 video. I'm going to be updating that, in the next couple months, hopefully, so that I'll bring that up to date with all the other charts I've analyzed in the last year. And then I do offer individual birth chart readings. If that's interesting to you, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com. I do those live on Zoom, on Skype as pre-recorded video, and as I do offer gift certificates if you'd like to give somebody a reading. I have another YouTube channel on natural medicine that talks about Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, and yoga, as well as homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. The name of that channel is Nature Source Care. All right. So as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right. So take good care, and until the next one, namaste.